Hello, welcome back to this interesting study in archaeology in support of the Bible. History has always been one of my favorite subjects. I just enjoy looking to the past and learning from it, and maybe that's what also led me to my love of the Bible because of the history contained within it. And in our past lesson, we had looked at cities, excavation sites today that archaeologists have gone out, they've discovered these cities, that they've used the Bible to locate these cities and have found them in the places where the Bible said they would be. They were existing in the time periods in which the Bible had stated, and the names matched, and we even read of rulers that we see within the pages of the Bible. As we looked at some of these city excavation sites, there was many artifacts found, one of which is inscriptions, and we saw that in a previous lesson. But in this lesson, I would like to continue on with looking at inscriptions because there are many inscriptions that aid us in finding out passages of the Bible are accurate. They're exactly as they have been stated. One such artifact or inscription that was found is called the Tel Dan inscription. This was discovered in Tel Dan, the Tel Dan excavation site. It began in 1966. It's actually Israel's oldest ongoing dig. It has produced remarkable discoveries, and it continues to do so. Now, located by the headwaters of the Jordan River near Israel's northern border. And another fascinating aspect of archaeology is, as I stated, the discovery of inscriptions. These are ancient writings. And when we find writings outside of the Bible that authenticate what is written in its pages, it's hard to refute the accuracy of the Bible. Now, one inscription that has caused a lot of excitement is that Tel Dan inscription that I just mentioned, also known as the David inscription. When we look to this, it is a stela or stele, and it is a stone slab. Somebody asked me here, well, how do you pronounce that? S-T-E-L-E. It's either stele or stele. Either one is acceptable, but it is a stone slab. This particular one was found in 1993 by Abraham Byram and his team, and it has been dated to the 9th century BC. Now, on this inscription it is written, the house of David. Also it says, King of Israel. King of Israel is often found in the Bible. We think of passages such as 1 Samuel 24 and verse 14, or 1 Kings 15 verse 9, even into the New Testament, Matthew 27 and verse 42, and in John chapter 1 verse 49. Now, this broken and fragmentary inscription commemorates the victory of an Armenian king over his two southern neighbors, the king of Israel and the king of the house of David. Now, the Armenian king boasts that he, under the divine guidance of the god Hadad, vanquished several thousand Israelites and Judahite horsemen and charioteers before personally dispatching both of his royal opponents. Unfortunately, the recovered fragments of the House of David inscription do not preserve the names of the specific kings involved in this brutal encounter. But most scholars believe that the stele recounts a campaign of Hazael of Damascus in which he defeated both Jehoram of Israel and Ahaziah of Judah. And we're talking about the time after Solomon when the kingdom was split in two, Israel and Judah. This is the oldest extra-biblical reference to Israel and Judah in Semitic script, that Semitic being Aramaic or Canaanite. And what we see is the King of David was a real historical person and not just some mythical character of the Bible. And this stela, it also recognizes David as setting up the kingdom of Judah. This is a very important find when we look to the Bible, and those that would say that Israel was never a nation, it was never a government or anything with an army, that this was just some nomadic tribe. Here we see a king not only confirming that Israel and Judah existed, but they were opponents. They were rivals. They were actually rivals of a nature to which to be recognized. Well, another fascinating discovery was made in 1976. when an inscription was found in Tel Dan with a bilingual translation, or inscription rather. This bilingual translation inscription is important because now we have something in two languages. So even if you're not sure of one, we have another. There's a comparison. And here was a stone that had carved on it the same message in both Aramaic and in Greek. And the inscription read, God who is in Dan. The Aramaic referring to a person named Zolios who made a vow to the God who is in Dan, or the God of the Danites. The inscription dating to the 3rd or early 2nd century BC, the times the Israelites would have been there. The discovery of this limestone tablet confirmed the identity of the site as the biblical Dan, just as we read of in the Bible. Also found in Tel Dan was a bowl dated the 9th century BC. Now, on it in Aramaic was the inscription of the butchers, this most likely belonging to a cook or a butcher in the royal house of Dan. Also on the bowl was an inscription dated to the 8th century BC, 1,000 years later. And this inscription said, belonging to Amos. This was the same name as the father of the prophet Isaiah, who prophesied in the 8th century BC, and who we read of in 2 Kings, also in Isaiah. While this was not the Amos that was the father of Isaiah, it is evidence that such names existed in the correct time period. In 1968, another inscription was found written in Phoenician inside a building dating to the 7th century BC. This inscription reads, belonging to Bel-Pelet, the name meaning, may Bel rescue. Baal being the pagan god we read of in the Bible. Numbers 22 in verse 41. Balaam was taken to the high places of Baal. In 1 Kings chapter 18, we read of the contest between Elijah and the prophets of Baal. When we read the Bible, when we read of Jesus being brought before Pilate, the governor of Judea, this was in his final days, even hours leading up to Jesus' ultimate crucifixion and death. In John chapter 12, in verse 28 and following, we read of the Jewish leaders bringing Jesus to Pilate. And while Pilate is mentioned 55 times in the New Testament, and all 4 gospel accounts in Acts and in 1 Timothy, archaeologists could not find any record of him outside of the Bible. For hundreds of years, nothing to corroborate Pilate being the governor of Judea, or there even being a man by the name of Pilate in Judea at the same time as Jesus. In 1961, an Italian archaeological team discovered a stone tablet. It was about 32 inches by 27 inches in size, but it held a wealth of information on it. The tablet had carved on it, Pontius Pilate, prefect of Judea. This has come to be known as the Pilate stone. Just what Luke had said in his gospel account, Caesar reigned from 14 AD to 37 AD. The 15th year would have been 29 AD. And this would have been the time John began his preaching. And being 6 months older than Jesus, as we read in Luke 3, verse 23, and beginning his ministry at about the age of 30, the common time for Jewish men, this would have made Jesus' ministry begin within a year or so of John bring the crucifixion to 33 AD. Archaeology is constantly confirming the Bible. And in fact, the renowned archaeologist Nelson Glueck wrote, it may be stated categorically that no archaeological discovery had ever controverted a Bible reference. Scores of archaeological findings have been made which confirm in clear outline or exact detail historical statements in the Bible. It's amazing, time and time again, even those who do not believe in the Bible have to admit that it is accurate, that it does not have any flaw within it. As we read Luke 3 in verses 1 and 2, Luke mentions several other individuals. He mentions Herod the Great. History records that he was appointed king over Judea from 36 BC until his death about 4 AD. The Bible records that it was Herod who ordered the deaths of the newborns in an attempt to kill the baby Jesus in Matthew 2 and verse 16. And maybe we shouldn't actually say baby because he could have been up to 2 years of age as we read the text. Now, Herod had two main building projects under him, the Herodium and a summer palace at Masada. Archaeologists found Herod's name in both locations on several artifacts. When we had mentioned how scholars had doubted Luke's accuracy in our first lesson, and because of his use of titles, and we saw that a tetrarch was an actual title and one who was in charge of a quarter of a region, scholars have doubted Luke's mention of Lysanias because they could find only one Lysanias in the Roman records, and he was a ruler of Chalcedon 50 years too soon. But then an inscription was found near Damascus recording a temple dedication naming Lysanias as the Tetrarch of Abila, and it reads, "For the salvation of the august lords of all their household, Nyphaeus, freedman of Eagle, Lysanias, Tetrarch, established this street and other things." Well, how do we know this is the Lysanias mentioned by Luke? It mentions the salvation of the Augustus lords, plural. The only time two people bore the title Augustus at the same time was during the reign of Tiberius, when both he and his mother Livia bore the title. She took the title of Julia Augusta after the death of Augustus Caesar, or Octavian, in AD 14. She died in AD 29, and so the inscription must have been created sometime between 14 and 29 AD, which coincides precisely with Luke's account. Therefore, the 15th year of Tiberius is the year 29, and it lies within the reign of the Augustus lords. This evidence supports Luke's reference that Lysanias was a tetrarch around the time of John the Baptist. Josephus also mentions this in his Wars of the Jews, and he writes, he added it to the kingdom of Lysanias, that the province of Abilene. Josephus, War of the Jews, chapter 2, 12, or book 2, chapter 12, verse 8. See, Josephus recognizes this Lysanias. We see Lysanias in the inscription. And again, we go back to the Bible, which had already spoken of Lysanias. We can have confidence in the Bible. Luke says that Annas and Caiaphas were the priests, but there could be only one high priest, according to Jewish law. The answer is simple, actually. Annas was serving as high priest, but the Roman authorities deposed him and named Caiaphas, his son-in-law, as the high priest. I guess government's taken, work with those who will work with them, so to speak. But as such, the Jews only recognized Annas. But in any dealings with the Romans, Caiaphas was the one who had to handle matters. And so we see the two would be seen as high priests together at the same time. Well, in 1990, 12 ossuary boxes were found in a burial cave in southern Jerusalem. One featured the name Caiaphas on it, and it read, "Joseph, son of Caiaphas." It was more ornate than the others found, and it had the name inscribed twice on it. It also fits with the inscriptions and burial customs to that time period of the Second Temple. Experts believe that this was the remains of the son of Caiaphas that we read of as being high priest at the time of Jesus' crucifixion. Also, in 2011, another ossuary box was discovered in the valley of Elah, where the Israelites camped when David fought Goliath. This box was inscribed, "Miriam, daughter of Yeshua, son of Caiaphas, priest of Maaziah from Beit Imri." This would fit with the priestly course, as the high priest was a son of Aaron, and Caiaphas was the son-in-law of Annas. However, after the deportation, ancestral lines were lost, and this is how it was now done by the Jews in the New Testament times. Miriam would then be Caiaphas' granddaughter. Luke uses so many notable persons in his account, from Jews to Roman officials, to nail down the date of his account with certainty. John, in John chapter 18 and verse 24 and following, also notes that Jesus was brought to Annas first, as he was seen by the Jews as the proper or rightly the high priest. But Annas then sends him to Caiaphas, which would then be necessary in order to bring Jesus forth to Pilate. We see all these people did in fact exist at the time indicated and would have interacted with one another. We then see it is not only reasonable, but it is logical that Jesus also existed at this time. And he interacted with these same individuals because the evidence is there with credibility and accuracy. Again, we can have faith in our Bible. Another interesting inscription is that of the Gath or Goliath inscription. This was found in 2006 in Tel Es Safi, which was the Philistine city of Gath. The inscription was on a type of pottery dating to around 970 BC. The script was in the Canaanite style of alphabetic Akkadian. It is also the earliest Philistine inscription ever found. The Philistines originated from around the Aegean Sea and spoke an Indo-European language. When they migrated to the coast of Israel, they adopted Semitic culture, including the alphabet, while retaining some aspects of their original language. In 1 Samuel 17, we read the biblical account of Goliath. And a champion went out from the camp of the Philistines named Goliath from Gath. 1 Samuel 17 and verse 4. The inscription on this shard is the equivalent of the name Goliath, although some dispute this because of the changing nature of the Philistine language. While none believe that this is a reference to the Goliath that David slew, again, there is evidence that the Philistines were in the correct area at the correct time in which the Bible tells us, and that such names such as Goliath were used among the Philistines during that time period that the Bible tells us of. Sometimes inscriptions are disputed not because of translation differences, like the Gath inscription, but because they are not found in situ or in place. In other words, they have been removed from their original location. And this often happens because of grave robbers throughout the ages. The Ahaz bulla or seal is one such inscription. It dates to the 8th century BC, but the place it was discovered is unknown. It was sold by archaeologist antique dealers, and it had been a dealer and has been authenticated, but some still dispute it. Not knowing where it originated, currently it is in the private collection of Shlomo Museh. The seal itself reads in ancient Hebrew, belonging to Ahaz, son of Joatam, king of Judah. Now, in the Bible, we read of Ahaz, son of Jotham. Ahaz was the king with Jotham during 736 BC, and then king alone at the age of 20 from 732 to 715 BC. The correct time for when this seal is dated. We also read of Jotham and Ahaz in the lineage of Jesus in Matthew chapter 1 and verse 9. We see again the archaeological discoveries support the accuracy and historicity of the Bible. Another unique feature of this seal is that it has part of a fingerprint on it. It could actually be that of King Ahaz. One does have to wonder. I thank you for your time in this study. We will pick up again and look at some more as we study more of these inscriptions. In the next study, we'll look at the Ahab ring. I thank you for your time. Remember, God loves you, and so do I.